Hello and good morning. I'm Martin Walker, the editor of Digital Printer magazine, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this webinar on the future of the connected print shop. I'm also delighted to be joined by Carl Sis from Zaikio, our sponsor for today's event. And along with Carl, we have Jeff Parnell of Premier Paper and Keith McMurtry of Thurston here today. Thank you all for joining us. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to explain how today's webinar will run. After I set the scene and introduce our topic for today, we'll hear presentations from our three speakers. You will be able to ask them questions via the chat box on your screen, and you can post those questions at any time during the presentations. If you could please indicate in your post who your question is for, it will help later. That's because we won't answer the questions until all three presenters have spoken, as your questions early on may be answered by another presenter who comes later, or you may wish to reframe them or even withdraw them in light of further information. The webinar is scheduled to last for 1 hour, and so we'll finish at midday by British Summer Time. So, what's it all about? What is a connected print shop? Perhaps the best way to say what it is to explain why we need it and what problems it helps solve. We're undoubtedly in a difficult time. Thanks to the COVID pandemic, we have staffing problems. These are both short-term, as people are still getting sick and needing time off, and longer-term, a skills gap is emerging because many have left the industry during the furloughs and re-evaluating work-life balance and factors like that. On top of that, we have rapidly rising costs of materials and energy, in addition to the well-known supply chain crisis. The end of the UPM strike in Finland is one bit of good news, of course, but how long will it take for production there to ramp up again after being shut down for so long? Then there's the war in Ukraine, which is only likely to have further knock-on effect on energy prices across Europe and beyond. So those phrases that many of you may feel you've been living by for decades already, do more with less, work smarter, not harder, seem more relevant than ever right now. And this is where the connected print shop comes in. If you're already struggling to resource your operations and your margins are disappearing under endless cost increases that you can't easily pass on, you have to look for ways to cut out unprofitable, tedious and error-prone manual processes so that your people can spend their time on more valuable things. And a lot of that comes down to data rather than machinery. Not so much the data within your business, but what flows or could flow between it, your customers and your suppliers. As an example of what I mean, fast and accurate estimating helps to win work, and it simplifies the billing afterwards when it's done. Reliable ordering of materials means more efficient job scheduling, so that you get the most out of your pre-press, production and finishing, as well as tying into logistics services for timely deliveries. That, in a nutshell, is what the connected print shop is all about. But it's also more than that. You've probably heard the expression digital transformation. It's something that almost every large company is talking about these days, and at first glance, it might not seem to be relevant to a printer, but it is. It's a way of carrying out business processes that makes the most of the fact that pretty well all the data that's needed exists on a computer somewhere. If we could just make use of that by passing that data around automatically, a lot of things could be done faster, more cheaply, and with fewer mistakes and delays. We'll hear more about digital transformation during this morning's session, and we look forward to answering your questions on it. So to start us off, I'd like to hand over to Carl Sis. Carl is Partner Success Director at Zaikio, and I'll let him explain what Zaikio is and why it's an integral part of the connected print shop. So over to you, please, Carl.
Thank you, Michael. Hello, everyone. The reason that Zaikio exists is because JDF was a great idea 25 years ago. Jdf Job Defined Format was a concept that a standard, if you like, a set of standards that was developed across multiple providers to the industry. And the idea was that it would allow individual suppliers to the industry to talk to one another. It would hook up machines with pre-press, post-press. It would essentially allow HP to work alongside Heidelberg or any other manufacturer. And the idea was very sound. The idea was very altruistic. It was for the good of the industry and for the good of the printer. What essentially happened, however, is that JDF as a standard was interpreted differently by various organizations and therefore moved away from being a standard. It actually increased costs and complexity, although actually it did give a standard for people to work by. The different interpretations meant that, of course, there was no one standard for people to work by. So a couple of years ago, I was involved in a very deep discussion about connectivity and JDF. And our management team went to Heidelberg and said, look, JDF, we think it's sort of slightly broken. What we propose is actually formalizing that into a platform with some standards in the same way, but a platform that then allows this interoperability to happen without the various versions of the same. So JDF was a great idea. Zaikio is the sort of 22 revision of that, where on the platform, multiple suppliers can sit. One integration, not many, those integrations that those suppliers have now are with one another. But of course, if you have 10 partners or 100 partners, you have to have 100 different integrations. And they need to be supported by all of those suppliers to the industry. So what we've done is we've proposed a platform whereby each individual supplier integrates just once. The idea of that is that users connected to those suppliers will only need one integration to connect to them all. The situation gets even better because using that standard, it allows these people on the platform, the integrated people on the platform, to communicate with one another without having to integrate with one another. So it's very much a more modern view on JDF. It's a product rather than a set of standards. So what we've done is we've worked quite heavily with Heidelberg. We're the sort of tech people, right? Heidelberg have the years and years of print industry knowledge. And we're also encouraging people like HP and other suppliers to come join us and to help build this platform. The platform itself will bring the benefit of high-speed communications. The quickest way from A to B is in a straight line. So you, as the printer, can now control that. If you sign up to Zaikio, you will eventually, and please don't misunderstand, we are on a journey. We have our first partners integrating now with the likes of Farstons and Print. But as time goes on, machine integrators will come on. And then, of course, we'll have pre-press and workflow and web to print and all of the post-press stuff in there as well. And the idea is that the printer has one integration, and that's it. And that is a single sign-on into the platform. That's it. He can then choose which supplier he uses along the chain as the process continues to choose that supplier or that supplier or that supplier. And indeed, those suppliers can be agnostic. They don't need to know who else the printer is working with for them to be able to work with these individual solutions. So, for example, you could have a web to print solution in there, you could have a workflow solution, you could have a pre-press solution, production, post, and indeed you could have multiple solutions and choose which solution you use on that line. So in essence, the connectivity of Zaikio allows a massive interoperability between all of the partners on the platform. Every single one has then the ability to work with everybody else. And that's what Zaikio is about. It's about democratizing data, democratizing those connections that now are expensive, that now have a lot of timescale, complexity embedded. We're taking all of that trouble away. So not just for you as the printer, not just for you as that individual connector to Zaikio, but your suppliers will find that actually the interaction between one another on the system becomes a lot easier too. So we're not just benefiting the end user and giving him this massive flexibility, but we're also providing something to the suppliers to the industry, because what suppliers want to be having 50 or 100 different connections out, right? It's difficult to maintain, it's difficult to, it's costly, of course, and that cost needs to be passed on. So what we're proposing is a low-cost connectivity solution that democratizes all of that complexity and cost, and therefore reduces it completely. We believe that data communications, the quickest point from A to B being in a straight line, data communications should all be within the realm of the printer and it should not be complex. We do not live in 1995 again, where these standards all have to be coded against. What we've done is we've coded all of that into the platform already. So no high-level consultancies, no massive bespoke integrations. That can all now flow, assuming your partner is on Zaikio, and we encourage you to speak to your partners about that. If your partners are on Zaikio, then you are able to transact with any other partner that's on Zaikio too. So yeah, we believe it's a win-win-win situation. We believe that you're going to be more accurate. If data flows through instantly, you're going to be more accurate with your quoting, you're going to be more accurate with your communications with the customer and pricing. But also with the market and the way it's changing, prices are going up and down and so on. And I'm sure the others will agree that actually that's problematic, because if you made a phone call 12 months ago about price, you'd get your price and you'd be sure that that was price within, you know, it was going to stay that way, and it was always going to be next day delivery and so on. But now times have changed. We're working on the basis that actually all of these communications, if we can simplify the communications, then the data that's passed through is live. So therefore, if you want to go back after 2 weeks' time and you want to press refresh, no problem, that data is refreshed. You don't need to make a phone call. We can avoid all of those emails that get transacted slowly and in a human way. What we're after is digitizing all of that communication layer. So yeah, I think I'm probably coming towards the end of my 10 minutes at the moment. So I guess I will hand over to the next speaker. But I do encourage anybody, if you want a Zaikio account for the printer, it's completely free of charge. Our economic model is that we take a slim percentage from the suppliers to the system. For the printer, totally free of charge. So I encourage you, sign up. And if you're a partner, a supplier to the industry, please just give me a call.
Thanks very much for that, Carl. I can see we've got some questions starting to pop up already, and I've certainly got quite a few based on what you said. As I said earlier, we will come to those at the end, so just keep sending them in, and we'll get back to you after we've heard from everybody else. Do we have Jeff? I was going to put him on.
Yes, I'm sorry, Michael. Yes, yeah, sorry about that. Had a few glitches here in Southampton, but I'm back.
Okay, just to introduce Jeff, he's the Corporate Key Account Director at Premier, and he's going to talk a little bit about how the integration with the Zaikio platform works from their perspective. So the floor is yours, Jeff.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, just really quick introduction on Premier for anyone who doesn't know us. So we're part of Oval, part of JPP, Japan Paper and Pulp. So we're visible in 21 countries. In the UK, here we have 14 warehouses up and down the country, paper merchanting, but also moving into relatively new markets for us in display graphic, in packaging, and really looking to become a one-stop solution. I think that's where this comes in, and where the connected print shop comes in, because it's how we can operate with our existing, and how we can operate with our new customer base, and mold our business to their needs. I think, as we mentioned this morning, time is of the essence in everyday life. If we have contract prices loaded, and we have visibility of stock, immediate stock, do we necessarily need that interaction, that phone call, the traditional phone call that will get into a paper merchant for a chat about price, about stock availability? We've got the capability now through Fasten, through Zaikio, to use the platform to drive that online, and customers have instant access to their pricing, to stock availability, and can make those decisions very quickly within their working day. And then that's backed up through with Premier's capability to then pick and deliver through our own network. So it's really moving, as I said, and evolving how we look after our customer base, to make sure that we have the capability through with our partners, with Thurston, who we've worked with for many years, and through now with Carl and the team at Zaikio, to make sure that we make things as seamless as we possibly can for our customers, and open up the capability to order and check stock price, not just through traditional methods, but also through these online platforms, and as we said, therefore saving time and becoming more efficient. So really, Michael, heading back to yourself, I think from myself at this point, that's really where we are, and look forward to answering any questions that may come through later.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I see some more questions coming in, and I'm adding to my list too. Right, I think we'll go now to Keith, who's going to give us a description of what I might call the full Monty approach to integration, where Zaikio is the kind of middle layer between Premier and Thurston MIS users. So Keith, over to you, please, to tell us how that works, what benefits it brings.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Welcome, everybody. Good morning. Just to be clear, it's full Monty, not as per the movie. Okay, so no concerns for anybody. So I thought I'd show a few PowerPoint slides and just try and graphically depict really what the type of thing that Carl was talking about, to show how we are building out the solution between Thurston and Zaikio. So I've got a slide here that shows the sort of three components that are currently in operation: quoting, billing, procurement. So what does this technology afford you as a connected customer? So as an unconnected, you are bound by probably most MISs will have an internal catalogue of substrates and materials, and when you're doing a quote, you do a search for it, you put the information in, and you're reliant on that material being present in the catalogue. And if it's a special, then you need to make a phone call and speak to someone, or go online, or whatever. And of course, it's a little bit frustrating, and it protracts the time taken to put the estimate together. In a connected environment, the catalogue is queried online. It goes through the Zaikio layer that Carl described, that sort of tunnel, if you like, between all these suppliers. And you can put in sort of attributes and say, I'm looking for this, 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 and this, and it will return back a list of items that meet that criteria. And you can query price, and you can also query, importantly today, more than anything, is the lead time. There's no point picking a substrate that you're not going to be able to get for however long. So that, great. I mean, it does actually improve things massively. Of course, the next side of it is the procurement side. So you're doing quotes for different quantities. We all know that there's, over the last few years, been a real push towards small run. So you're quoting often on a price, not necessarily getting the benefits of bulk price or pallet pricing, bulk prices from the supplier. And you can have many jobs together. Now, what we can do with Zaikio is we can pass through, if you like, producer requisitions call and say, these are all the materials I want. And then Zaikio can then go away and say, right, okay, querying that with the merchant, and in this case, Premier Paper, they can give back the best price based on the product mix of pallet and ream wrapped packaging. And of course, that's a little bit of extra margin that you're going to make. And of course, then there's little sort of side benefits, and that's the sort of improves the billing stage. So at the moment, there is no actual e-billing, shall we say. However, the fact that your price and your order has gone through as per the price quoted by directly from the, say, Premier Paper in this example, you know that when your invoice arrives, it's going to match, and that doesn't sort of add that administrative burden in sort of figuring out, why is the price come in at this? I was expecting it to be the other, where this is actually always going to match, and gives you the opportunity to auto match invoices to orders. And again, streamlining, reducing the need for mundane repetitive work. ultimately, you know, we've got the opportunity for e-billing where the invoice comes automatically straight in, and that's just an extra win as we develop. So what's in it for MIS suppliers? Happy customers is what's in it for us, really. You know, we have to put the effort into building out this functionality, just as in the people at Premier have to do the same thing. We get happier customers and more efficient customers as well. And more efficient customers have got more money to spend on MIS licensing. And that's that's a reality. So just in summary, the benefits to printers with an MIS Zaikio: you've got access to a full catalogue, which includes access to specials and so on, rather than you having to have everything built into your own MIS, which adds a massive amount of administrative maintenance anyway, especially with the changing pricing that's going on and availability at the moment. You've got access to up-to-date pricing. You've got optimum pricing when you're doing bulk orders, stock availability information, and of course streamlined invoice processing. But just a few caveats. You know, Carl said it was early days. It is early days at the moment. So both ends of the transaction need to support the same level of functionality. Carl's absolutely right, and I totally agree with what he said about JDF. There's open to all of these different interpretations, these different recipes, if you like. This means that it's only going to be as good as the weakest connection. So you might have Premier Paper and another merchant, and in order to get the richest experience for the end user, both ends of that chain need to be taking advantage of the Zaikio platform, function calls and attributes to get as much information through and get as much information back. And of course, the other thing, like a lot of systems these days, they all have to be up and operational in order for it to work. And if the system goes down, then of course that potentially breaks your workflow. But you know that we all live with that every day anyway. But it's just a word of a caveat there to mention. And that's it. That's it for me. I thought I'd quickly whiz through. So I'm sort of explaining graphically what it means. We're currently in progress working with Zaikio, and we've got quite a lot of what I would call the technical plumbing working, and we're just doing the finer parts of the integration, and we'll be looking for some mutual customers out there that want to give this a go. So yeah, any questions for me, fire them into the chat, and I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay, thanks, Keith. Right, well, now we've heard from all three of our suppliers. I hope this is giving you a bit of a clearer picture about what connecting via Zaikio can offer and how that could help not only in the immediate short term, but also over a longer period into the future. So I certainly have a few questions. I guess perhaps the biggest and hardest one to answer, and this is open to anybody who wants to have a shot at it, is can you quantify the savings that you might get from this? It's intuitively obvious that if you can do things faster and more accurately, you save time, and time is money and so on. Is there any way that you can put any kind of number on how much this is going to help?
I think that's a difficult question to answer, but I suppose people can answer that themselves. How many processes do you have that don't link up with one another? How much time does that cost you? How much time are you plowing into manual operations where there is actually a solution there that you're not using because it's not connected with your current systems? Any question that yields a positive response there is going to be, saved, if you like. So all of that manual operation is going to be saved. Live data coming in is also going to save long tail, I suppose, requirements. So when you quote a job, coming back 2 weeks later to re-quote the job, if you do it manually the first time, you will do it manually the second time. So, there's a long tail to this, but I think the answer to the question is if you analyze your business and look at where the manual operations are, they are where the cost savings can probably be made.
Okay, thanks, Carl. Going down a more technical tack, you referred quite a lot to JDF, Carl, at the beginning of your comments. I'm not quite clear. Are we saying that Zaikio replaces JDF? What about people who already have functioning JDF installations and potentially a substantial investment into that technology? Does it coexist? Does it replace it? What happens?
Okay, so it's not a direct replacement because ultimately it's a very different thing, right? So JDF is a standard, and those standards, as we know, were interpreted differently, but people will still pay for the consultancy and for the dev to link those systems together. That's not wasted. That's put those companies at an advantage with JDF. What we're doing is we're building a platform rather than a set of standards, and that's very different in its whole approach. JDF is not dead, but I would say it's sort of aiming for its last legs, really, because why would you spend that money on doing that when there's a platform there that does that for you anyway? It may be that some of the integrations that we're looking for, or that the principal is looking for, are not partnered with Zaikio, and therefore would still require that JDF scenario. Or indeed, if it's slightly more bespoke, and we don't cover that, then yeah, clearly there's still a place for JDF. But no, I would say we're not a replacement for it, but what I would say is that we probably sound the death knell for it in the end.
Can I just jump in as well, Michael? I think, yeah, I hear what you're saying. I mean, the thing is with the world today is that I think Zaikio right now augments the functionality that JDF offers. And if the vision is ultimately realized, then yes, theoretically it could replace it, providing it requires all of the vendors to come on board, just as JDF requires the vendors to come on board. People today expect to have to use multiple systems and multiple technologies, and you create the best of breed for you. So it could be that there is an organization out there that it isn't appropriate to move into Zaikio. Who knows? It's early days. But I don't think it'll die, but it will make vendors think, because we've all spent a massive amount, as you say, Michael, we've spent a lot of money as vendors supporting the JDF platform. And you're right, it took a long time to arrive at sort of, I use the term recipes, that standard recipes. And even then it comes down to the different level of implementation between point to point. And so, there's a lot of sense in this. There's a lot of, there's a lot of technical sense in the Zaikio platform. The right once use many approach is good practice, but it's augmenting what people might have with JDF at the moment, and we'll see where the future takes us.
Okay. Just another aspect. This is one for you, Carl. Am I right in saying that to use Zaikio with Premiere, you don't have to have the integration into Fastly MIS, but there is a web browser-based version where you can see pricing and ordering? Is that correct?
Yeah, but whether you do or not, the interface within Zaikio still exists. So the advantage to working with an MIS is always that the requirements are already known when you want to quote the job. So rather than using our interface to manually position your requirements and request the price, what the MIS does is it positions those requirements for you. So again, it's digitization of what essentially would be a manual process, right? So yeah, with the MIS already having to quote for various components of the job, that fits in well with what we're doing. So yes, you can do it manually. My preferred route is, of course, always by the MIS, because it's reducing a manual process, right?
Okay. And you mentioned, Carl, that you're planning to expand out across workflow, pre-press, other aspects. You mentioned HP, which is would be a great name to get on board. I mean, is there a roadmap, a planned rollout? Is it just very much as it comes? I mean, what further development might we expect this year, for example?
Okay, so we did start with paper because, of course, it's the largest of the substrates, if you like, that are used. But we're moving out now into large format, and we're including things like inks, various consumables, We will eventually have machines hooked up to the system. We will also have things like spare parts and so on. So we aim to bring the whole industry together. This isn't really a Heidelberg project. This is us saying to Heidelberg, right, you need to be open, you need to be communicative with the rest of the industry. But it's exactly the same message as we're taking to other suppliers. So yeah, we aim to have all I suppose procurement items on the system by the end of the year, and then by that time we're also then launching mission control, which is the data layer where machines can talk to one another and suppliers can sort of integrate that way rather than integrated through the through the end user. So yeah, it's a big journey we're on. Of course, we have the funding to do that. So I think this journey this year is going to be more about developing the procurement piece out. And then when we get to the end of this year, mission control will hit, and that's the sort of the data exchange between partners and suppliers to the industry. So yeah, it's a very substantial journey that we're going on. We've gone from 8 people 18 months ago now to nearly 40 people. So we're putting the development capacity in there to be able to do that.
Okay, mission control sounds like an interesting thing. Can you sort of give us an example of what that might actually mean in practical terms?
Yeah, I mean, this is the nirvana situation whereby actually there's open communication between every element of the print shop. We've developed what you might call, I'm a technical person, so I suppose I call it a solutions matrix. Within the print shop, there is a solutions matrix. Through every single stage, there are solutions which fit in with that need. Our job is really about knitting all of those solutions together and allowing, I suppose, people who want to work with Heidelberg to be more easily working with Heidelberg. People who want to be working more easily with HP or any other suppliers, we're sort of taking that integration burden away and allowing, literally, through the single sign-on, all of that to happen. So yeah, massive journey we're on this year. The data connectivity piece will be launched by, we hope, December. That's certainly the plan. Although I have worked with developers before, so that might be January.
Okay, well, that's software development for you, I guess.
Indeed.
Okay.
I'm Michael. I've just seen a really interesting question come in, actually, which from one of our
Go for it.
Attenders. I thought I'd like to jump in and answer it, because I think it dovetails a little bit into what Carl was just talking about there. So this is from somebody who said, data from paper merchants from experience is inconsistent, often resorting to abbreviations. For MIS providers to use that description data directly through to our estimate, it needs to be right. Can this be sorted between the 3 partners and not rely on the printer to sort? That's a brilliant question, because that fundamentally is what this does. The point is that there's a defined, shall we say, catalog description, a schema, to use the technical term, and that's what Zaikio says. They say they will describe, this is what a material looks like. These are the attributes, and it's up to then the people using it, such as Premier Paper, they have to describe it in a common way. It's a common data format. It's the idea behind what JDF was supposed to be. And it's a common data format. And you're right, the person asked the question, Les, hi Les, and you're right, you do get this export of information coming from the merchants, and then they're having to twist it and mold it and transform it to make it appropriate to come into MIS, and that is a huge administrative burden. And when it goes wrong, that has a huge impact. So when we were talking about what are the real cost savings, wow, if that goes wrong and somebody's job gets quoted wrong, that could be, that's a real win to get around that. I think the other question from me, for all of us really, is these definitions. Obviously Zaikio are putting them together, but when it comes down to the supply of materials, then of course Premier and people like them, they own that description, because they know more about that subject matter than anybody else. But as Zaikio go through elsewhere, who knows most about what a press and a print run might look like? Who knows what a job might look like, an order might look like, because somebody needs to own the definition so that we're all speaking to the highest level. Because for this to work, the attributes and it needs to be very, very rich. We need to say as much as we can about the job, about the material, about the client, about the shipping address, and so on. But it will be a case of one format. So you're right, Les, it will fix that problem. Brilliant question. Thank you.
So we also just had a question about data and who owns data. It's a very common question, and the good news is Zaikio doesn't own any data, right? If you create the data, you own it. So if it's created through Tharstons, presumably, you still own that data. If the data is produced by Premier, for example, and imported into our system, again, that data is Premier's data. Zaikio don't hold any data whatsoever.
I think there's another. Yeah, I think there's another question on that, which I think is right up your street. The one about the visual site of the suppliers and vendors.
Sorry, where's the question?
It's in the pinned section.
Shall I read it out? This is Danny Nery's question, yes? Okay, just for clarity, as a print company user on a platform, would I have access to or sight of suppliers and vendors by virtue of them being on the platform, or do I have to pre-select them as existing suppliers of mine? Leading to another question as to pricing per printer.
Right, brilliant. We are not a website, okay? We're a connectivity platform for the print industry. We are not a marketplace. We don't want prices to be driven down to the point of frustration for the suppliers. This is about you connecting with your suppliers. So as you come in to Zaikio, you then have the option to connect with Premier in this instance, and create that link. So we're really not a website platform like Amazon or anything like that, where the marketplace is, you're searching multiple catalogs and so on. I mean, don't get me wrong, just like you might have 3 tabs open, you may have a requirement for 3 different suppliers. But realistically, you choose your supplier based on your current supply chain, and we're about digitizing that, not necessarily throwing thousands of connections in. You would still need an account with Premier. You would still get your account-based pricing from Premier, and of course the local delivery dates too. So yeah, it's just like digitizing the existing relationship, really.
Okay, well, speaking about relationships, I had a question for Jeff, who mentioned the Premier is expanding into display and signage materials and packaging. Do you have any sense, Jeff, for where this integration would be most useful and where it's most likely to be taken up first? Would it be in those areas, or is it more likely to be in mainstream commercial work? Where do you see it picking up?
I think Michael, initially, from what we're seeing the take up through the commercial print customer base. That's been the initial feel. But we, as I said, we want to make sure this is open to all of our customers, and any new potential customers coming our way. I think it's also fair to say, Carl, and I need to say here as Premier, that we are obviously one of a number of suppliers in the UK. To get the full potential of Zaikio would be to have more and more suppliers on board. So whilst we're very much at the early stages here, and we're very, very pleased to partner Zaikio here, we're also fully aware that to maximise this platform, we really need our, dare I say, our competition alongside us here for our customers to really maximise the potential that this will bring.
Yeah, sure. So on that score, we're already working very heavily with Antalis in Europe, and I know that they will come. We've got some very good discussions going on with Elliott Baxter at the moment, and they're just really for commercial papers. We're obviously talking to inks, plates, across the board suppliers. So yeah, I mean the richness of the platform is enhanced by multiple suppliers coming on, and yeah, we're in the process of doing that right now. So yeah, valid point.
Okay, another question that goes to selection of substrates. I mean, clearly it's fine and very efficient if you know what you want and it's a repeat order, or a composite order of a whole bunch of different materials. What happens if one of those is not available? Is it smart enough to suggest alternatives? Can you do that, or are we then back to somebody picking up the phone or worse still, the customer not picking up the phone and perhaps just going somewhere else? What happens in that case?
Well, I can answer that. I think, Carl, save you the job. The whole point of this is you are querying a catalogue. If there's the way we've sort of looked at this is that if you've got a one-to-one relationship within I've said I've quoted it on this, or I've used this material before and I want to use it again, by going through that requisitions, it does a validation to make sure it is still available. And if it isn't, you can then take the attributes of that item and say, well, show me what else that you've got that meets that particular criteria. It could be FSC, it could have to be suitable for indigo. And there are, as you know, for materials, there are many, many, many other characteristics that you might need to match. And the point is that the user can then see, or the person doing the procurement can see, right, these are available. It might be they're not 100%, but they can use their judgment then, and they don't have to pick up a phone. They can get a price, they can get availability without having to pick up a phone. They can see there and then what's going on. So I think it really does help in that particular situation. I think that's actually one of its greatest assets, really, is being able to validate the request before you actually go ahead.
That's right. Absolutely, Keith. There is a sort of a slightly second element to this for us. Zaikio is not about replacing the relationship with the supplier. It's about enhancing it. So we think that actually a lot of those orders, as Keith has suggested, right, they're just repeat orders, or they're based on, you having to pick up the phone because there's something special about it or something has changed. In reality, we're not replacing the supplier's customer service phone calls, right, when they're valuable. But when they can be repeated or automated, they should really go through Zaikio. It's not, we're not really saying that the relationship has changed with, so for example, a Premier customer still has an account manager, still has their account-based pricing, but all we're doing is making that flow of information so much more speedy. But rest assured, if you still want to pick up the phone and you still want to talk to your account manager, that's still possible. Right? Premier have got big open arms for that. I guess what we're doing is really taking away the 80 or 90% of run rate stuff, maybe. I think that's maybe how we describe it, is the stuff that can be repeated. All of that stuff needs to go through Zaikio, really.
And that is fundamental what automation is about, isn't it? It's reducing and removing the repetitive, the mundane, to allow people to be free to spend more of their time adding value to their customer services. That's what we need. Your resource is scarce, it's the skills shortage. So we need to do more with less, as you said at the opening there, Michael. So by freeing up people's time, whatever that time might be, if you spend 15 minutes a day doing something that you can take down to 30 seconds, and that's 15 minutes you couldn't spend looking after customers, but it gives you a lot more bang for your buck at the end of the day.
That's right.
Okay, so it doesn't
completely agree with
the customer relationship. It sort of runs alongside it. Okay. Keith, you mentioned e-billing for payment Luddites like me. Can you just explain exactly what that is?
Yeah, sorry. Basically, instead of the idea being that the merchant electronically sends the invoice directly into the printer system, so you're not having to take an invoice in and scan it. There are technologies that auto scan invoices and do auto matching, but wouldn't it be good if it could just come all the way through and straight in? And it doesn't necessarily to go through and be signed off and approved for payment. It can still go in at a sort of a holding area, but that would remove a huge amount of administrative burden. And if that isn't a repetitive type job, I don't know what is. So that's a real benefit that can come in the future. Now, it does add lots of other challenges, does e-billing or invoicing. I mean, but it certainly has to be an area we aim for, because it really does play to Zaikio's strengths.
Okay, no, I mean,
Right.
that makes sense.
So there is a little bit more to that as well. The data that we're working on is live. So when we quote and then you order, it's always going to match at that point as well. You're never going to take a quote 2 weeks ago, try to order against that price and have it rejected with the supplier because the price is wrong. Or have the supplier change the price and it not tally with your accounts when the invoice comes in. So,
yeah,
you know, there's a very long tail benefit to all of this.
Yes.
Okay, just looking at the questions coming in. Somebody after a bit more background. When was Zaikio launched in Germany? Just wondering how much experience / feedback exists to date.
Yeah, so we launched last year in Germany. My role was to find the first partners globally, and we found them in Germany. Of course, Zaikio is a German company based in Mainz. We now have 550 customers, the first 500, of course, in Germany, and we're now aiming towards 50 customers in the UK. It is early days for us in the UK, of course. Premier, we are working with as our first launch partner really in the UK, and we're working with Arstons as our, you know, they've got first MIS in the UK. But we are on a journey. We have a vast amount of experience in Germany. The biggest suppliers in Germany are now pretty much all supplying papers and substrates through Zaikio. So yeah, don't worry, we're not a fresh startup. And
hello, have we lost?
It doesn't look. It looks like the piece of string connecting Wales to England is not wet. Okay,
we've lost you, Carl. I hope you can rejoin. But I think he stayed with us long enough to answer that particular question. I'm just wondering if I can fly some of these others. Okay, here's a couple of more generic ones. As well as cost concerns, given the recent substrate supply issues, how can such a system help printers ensure business continuity in the future?
Whoa, what a question. I'm not sure. I think it's just...
That's a very broad question.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, ensure business continuity in the future. I think we've... So 2020, you know, brought about a huge amount of change, didn't it? The whole world accelerated its technological platforms. We had to change overnight. You know, a lever was pulled, and people had to work from home. McKinsey called it the Great Acceleration, and in 2021 we all then transitioned. And so I think it's part of a mix of a lot of technological platforms that we've all had to put in place. We're all using these sort of Teams type environments. We've got a lot of remote tools that we use to help our company operate in a hybrid environment, to use the phrase that everyone's using at the moment. So I think it's just one of many ingredients that help. It's not going to ensure business continuity. At the end of the day, if sales dry up and you run out of cash, then you're doomed. But if you can get hold of materials, if that's been your problem, the supply chain, then of course, yes, it will improve. If you're able to work remotely with this type of system, because you've got, ultimately we have the e-billing working and you're not having to go into the office and pick up invoices, that streamlines your organization. And all of these things, I think, contribute to business continuity on the whole.
Okay, I have another question for Jeff, actually. Again, going back to your sort of diversification into other markets and applications, it's been my observation that automation of any type, but particularly on the software side and workflow, perhaps has the slowest uptake in sign and graphics, whether that is because of the sheer diversity of applications and so on that go on there and substrates. I mean, does that match your experience, or are you finding those guys are actually as tech savvy as anyone?
No, I think they're as tech savvy as anyone, Michael. I think very much we're in the early stages of our partnerships here. Certainly in terms of substrate and diversification of substrate, we've already talked through the paper market and the differences between indigo, non-indigo, litho, dry toner. So the amount of product across traditional markets is probably no different to across the new market. And certainly in my experience with our sign display customer base, they're as tech savvy as our traditional customers. So I don't think that's a barrier. I really don't. I think this is us taking this to market. I think it's something our customers are looking for, and it's us taking this to market and giving them solutions effectively.
I think that also, Jeff, that you find the areas that are under the most pressure, the sectors that are under the most pressure, they're the ones that are forced into really accelerating their technological platform, because they have to do, got to put things in place. So commercial's been under huge pressure, and they're actually leading the way in all of the connectivity across the whole gamut of operations throughout their business. You look at those sectors that have survived the pandemic and have traditionally been doing very well, and you find that they've not had to. They've had the luxury to be able to do, I'll just have a person do this, that's their job. But as pressure is put on them, they will naturally turn to technology to see where they can make extra efficiency and extra gain. So it is coming, I'm sure. I don't think it's because of ability or skills. I think it's maybe they're not reached that same place that a lot of the commercial printers are in.
Okay, yeah. Glad to see we've got Carl back, because we have a couple of more questions for him. One is, can I register for Zaikio?
You disappeared on me.
Sorry, Carl?
It was you.
No, it was me. Okay, cool.
Yeah, question at the top of the list, if you can see it, Carl. Can I register for Zaikio if none of my suppliers is connected to the platform? And I guess the corollary would be, is there a benefit in doing so?
Yeah, you can absolutely take an account. It's free to all printers and service providers. So you can certainly take an account now. If you're a Premier customer, then of course you can start using it straight away. If you're a Thousands customer, I guess that's going to be launching in a week or two, or this month certainly, or next month certainly. Now, if your partner is not connected to the system still works, right? So you can actually add your own partners in. You can actually add your own products in there, and then the system will send your order to the supplier. It's done in a very, how can I put this? It's a basic connection if you want to do it that way, but you can add your own suppliers. But what we would really suggest is please take an account. We're on a roll this year, if you like, so more and more suppliers will come on board, and we'll let you know when those suppliers come on. So there is an advantage to staying in touch as such. But we're also really interested to hear what suppliers you, as an end user, might want on the system. Now, if you take an account, you can then use the feedback mechanism to say, hey, my supplier is this. What timescale have you got for getting them on board? So realistically, is there an advantage straight away? Yes, to many. No, if your partner isn't yet on the system, and indeed that's the feedback we get. I agree with the earlier comment that actually it needs to be a fully rounded solution to be the perfect solution. So we want to work with end users to sort of gain an idea of what their main suppliers are, and work with them to bring those onto the system. So there we go. Yeah, take an account.
Okay, and then there is I think a connected question about companies in Germany. Are, I don't know these names, Igepa and Inapa in Germany already connected with Zaikio?
Yeah, so we in various ways, really. We have so good relationships with Inapa, Igepa, Laipa, Antalis, Sapi. So yeah, whether they're sort of integrated fully for the whole world, I would say not. I mean, certainly what we're doing is we're working on individual markets with individual suppliers. So yeah, we've got good relationships with all of the main suppliers in Germany.
Okay, and we have another question. Where can I see a demonstration of this technology in action? I mean, is there a kind of canned demo, or is it better just to sign up and try it?
Well, it's a bit of both, really. Sign up, take a look. But we have a new salesperson in the UK. So either myself or she, her name's Louise Pasquini, would be willing to, show them around the system. But guys, this isn't a complex system, right? We don't need 4 hours of demo to do this. We could show you around in literally 3 minutes, because all we're doing is saying, look, choose your supplier, add your requirement, receive the price and the availability, and order. And if you're connected to an MIS like Fastens, it's even easier, right? Because you don't even need to position your requirements. The MIS does that for you. But yeah, give us a shout. We'll happily demo for you. We'll happily answer any questions on a more personal basis for you, for sure.
Okay. Well, we're coming towards the end of the time. We just have one more question from earlier, which I think we sort of touched on, but it might be a good one also to end up on, as I think it kind of involves everybody. It was really addressed to Carl, but it says, automation is critical to my company. So how far can this system integrate fully with my whole business to help close the production loop? So I think maybe all three of you would like a last word on that.
Yeah, there's a big question back to that question, really, and where is the gap in your production loop? If we can understand that, then we can understand how we can maybe fill that. But look, Zaikio is not a solution in itself, right? We are not providing any of the endpoint solutions. What we're doing is we're providing the platform for all of those solutions to sit in. So Fastens, for example, might have the solution to their problem. They're sat on the platform, so they just need one integration with us. Depending where, of course, or what help is needed where. But eventually, we'll be able to help everybody across the line with all of their production loop cycles, if you want to call it that. We call them blocks, but whether you call them cycles or what have you, I think there is there's a universal need to look at every part of the business, from literally, first contact with the customer all the way through quoting, workflow, production, post-press, shipping. It all needs looking at, because ultimately that's what we're about. We're about A to B, and there's nothing in the middle there that we won't touch.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you're right, Carl. I mean, for whatever we might think, JDF at the moment, with the level of maturity it's reached, does cover that sort of central production part, if we like, doesn't it? Pre-press, press, post-press. But this has got a wider gamut, in that we're talking about orders coming in, we're talking about procurement going out, and we're talking about connectivity ultimately to shipping providers, and then completing the loop with the billing coming back. And who's to say there's not going to be the opportunity for, and then messages to your customers. You might punch out to SMS providers, this has just happened, I'm just giving you a status message. It covers that sort of the customer facing bit rather than the internal. So your production loop should be a given, and given the relationship between Zaikio and Heidelberg, that bit should be pretty much a given, I would have thought. But I think for automation to be successful, you've got to think of as far, and you say, Carl, where are the points, where are the opportunities for connectivity? And that's where you look at whether a Zaikio or a platform that this sort of write once, use many approach is appropriate. So
yeah, very much so.
Okay, thanks. We're coming up on the hour, but we have got one last question. This one's quite interesting. Would it be possible using Zaikio for printers to resell paper to schools, etc.?
Printers could buy the paper through Zaikio and do with it as they wish. Yeah, I mean, yeah, clearly. If they can purchase the paper, then they can resell the paper. But I mean, you know, it's a connectivity tool. We don't get involved in the models behind. We're really about creating those connections. The commercial relationships with you and suppliers remain exactly the same.
Okay.
Yeah, I suppose they'd have to.
Sorry,
I'm just sorry, just to come in. I don't know whether that question is geared towards waste paper or geared towards a printer setting up some sort of stationary arm. So perhaps some clarification on that. But certainly, if it's overflow paper or waste, then I'm sure there's a capability there. If it's a printer moving into the stationary market, I'll leave them to perhaps fight that out.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely.
We're at the top of the hour. I think that has to bring us to the end of the webinar. I hope you found it useful and thought-provoking, and that it's given you something that you can take away and implement in your own business. If you want to watch the webinar again, it will be available on demand to anybody who registered, and we will be able to email you a link to it. If you want to sign up and try out Zaikio procurement for yourself, it's free for printers, as Carl has said, and it's easily found online. We're planning also to continue covering these topics in Digital Printer Magazine, and if you'd like to contribute to that in any way, I'd love to hear from you. If you don't already receive the magazine, that too is free, and you can sign up for it on our website, digitalprintermag.co.uk. So, in closing, I'd like to thank our sponsor Zaikio. Thank you, Carl, as well as Jeff from Premier and Keith from Farston, and of course all of you who joined us today. Thank you for your time. Have a good afternoon and goodbye.